Welcome everyone. Thank you all for joining for the webinar on commercial and industrial building solutions. I'm Pratichi Avinash, Manager Marketing at R&M India. We had a wonderful session last month on Make in India and Defense, and looking forward to a great session today as well. I request everyone for their active participation throughout the webinar. You can share your questions, if any, in the Q&A box, which will be taken up in the end. I hope this session will be of value to all the attendees. I would like to hand over to Mr. UN Marwa, Chairman R&M India, for the welcome note.
Good afternoon, everyone. I would like to welcome all the participants for today's webinar on commercial and industrial building solutions, which is being organized by R&M India. R&M India is a consulting firm. We've been operating for almost 75 years and spanning 3 generations. We have branches today in Gurgaon, Bangalore, Raipur, London, and shortly we shall have one in Bombay. With the recurring update in technology, we have been seeing a sea change in the building solutions, whether it's commercial or industrial buildings. There has been a vast area of upgradation and improvement based on technology, through which the architects, builders can really create brilliant buildings, which are technologically up to the mark with all the latest softwares, etc. Today, we shall be taking up a few topics which are of this nature. However, before I commence the session, I would like to introduce and convey my gratitude to all the panelists who spared their time to join us and share their expertise here. Anubhav Jain holds a master's degree from London School of Economics, graduate from Purdue University, where he studied finance and marketing. During his course at Purdue and after graduation, he's gained experience in finance and marketing while working at Johnson & Johnson, as also Bank of America. He went on to work at Eli Lilly and Company before returning to India in 2007 and heads the Silvergate Group of real estate developers. He has a passion for creating lifestyle residential developments and plays an integral role in all stages of various real estate projects, including golf projects, as he is also a passionate golfer. Welcome, Anubhav. Gaurav Bhatia is a director of Triumph Concepts, which is a 360-degree turnkey interior design and build firm. They take up retail and stores for a Body Shop, Dyson, and various others. Founded in 2012, Triumph Concepts is headquartered in Delhi, with offices across India, UK, Australia, South Africa. Currently, in expanding the business, Gaurav has been instrumental in forming a JV with a leading international Spanish company to form a joint venture of ETC for a rollout of all Apple showrooms in India. Welcome, Gaurav. And of course, R.M. Manveer has been drawn to technology and finance. He's merged the two concepts and founded Meyer Capital. He was an undergraduate in network and social systems engineering, a master's in systems engineering from the University of Pennsylvania. He has the necessary knowledge and skill set in engineering, interest in algorithms and data analytics. Meyer Capital is based on R.M.'s vision of a model that caters to a wide range of investors interested in safe and profit-yielding investments in the real estate sector. R.M. is a recipient of the prestigious C. Vikla Award in recognition of scholarly achievements in service to the School of Engineering and Applied Sciences. He has also had the honor and pleasure to work with the Nobel laureate R.K. Pachauri during his research in green growth and urban development. Lastly, I'd like to introduce our host for today's session, Raghu Marva. Raghu is the managing partner and CEO of R&M India. He comes with an experience around 20 years and has expertise in advising and structuring businesses overseas on behalf of Indian corporate clients, entry strategy for foreign clients who set up businesses in India. I would now like to hand it over to Raghu for opening the interactive session. We all look forward. Raghu, please take over. Thank you all.
Thank you so much for those kind words. I was a little embarrassed with my introduction, but yeah, I definitely learned a lot more about the panelists on today, and thanks for that detailed introduction, Mr. Marva. So before we start, I'm going to start with a quote, a quotation from the famous American author Edward Everett Hale, who had said that coming together is a beginning, keeping together is progress, but working together is success. So, this is the first webinar of 2023, like Pratichi said. So I guess we're halfway there when we're all getting together and working together. So this is to, much success in 2023 ahead to not only the panelists, but everybody else, all the delegates who've joined us today. And with that happy note, let's jump straight into the first topic of the session, which is with Anubhav on innovations in US market and commercial and other developments. Hi, Anubhav. Hope you're doing well.
Yes, all well. Thank you. Lovely introduction as well. Good to be here.
So the first topic that I'd like to ask you is about the impact of PropTech apps. We all in India as well use a lot of apps, and there are a lot of these PropTech apps which are very popular in the US, like Zillow, Trulia, which deal with listings, Roomy, which deals with maybe virtual staging, DealPath, which deals with real estate investing on the real estate market in US. So what are your views about, the kind of impact that these PropTech apps have? And maybe you'd like to also, give some experience on your PropTech, on the India side as well while we are at it. Over to you.
Sure. No, I think, of course, technology has been, a game changer for all industries. I don't think real estate is immune to that. I think world over, we've seen, and recently in India as well, that, technology has played a huge role in, in different ways, of course, in connecting people, connecting, customers, connecting buyers with sellers, or whether it's connecting vendors, to, purchasers and so on. So, of course, it's been, very interesting journey. And I can only say that, transparency plays a huge role because, there's a bit of information asymmetry which has been there in the market. I think what technology does is, by and large, it eliminates that. And of course, the customer gets that advantage. So, whether it's simple thing like buying property, Zillow is probably a great example, stemming from the US, where, you can actually zoom in and, see the price of each home, on any US street that they cover, which I think they cover probably 95% of the US territory. And not only that, but, they even have property photographs and so on. In fact, I have a home in Texas, and during the lockdown, when I could not travel, I could just go on Zillow and take a look at, what the value is. And they even had, a picture of the living room and so on, because there's a process that they have in place, where they do property valuations. They do a check every year, and they charge you property tax. So I think those things are now coming to India, obviously. Also, being in Gurgaon, you can see now, the municipal corporations now stepping up, collecting taxes, putting in the infrastructure. So I think we're yet to see a lot of that technology influx come into India. But no doubt, whether you talk about, broking, or you talk about just, giving information or connecting people, technology has played a huge role. And I think it'll continue to do so. When you can see the kind of investments that, are coming in to these, platforms. that is also, I think, a big indicator of the kind of change that we're going to see in terms of the impact on the industry with technology with these apps.
Absolutely, that's so true, and I things like comps. Whenever you talk about comparables, if you say I have got a place in Gurgaon, I want to put it on the market, I want to sell it. The first thing that comes to mind is what is the price. So the transparency in some of the US markets is something, of course, that we look forward to having in India. But that, I think, is a game changer, and exactly what you talked about. Better, larger brokerage firms or better research companies which can put out that kind of comps is obviously going to improve sales and transparency for everybody. That's really that's very impactful. So next we're going to go to the next question, Anubhav, about obviously post COVID, everybody's maybe lifestyle patterns have changed. So one of the things that a lot of people are seeing is the impact on health and wellness. A lot of people have putting a great emphasis on health and wellness. Mobility, people are talking about EVs, they're talking about driverless cars. So is that changing the real estate design and, especially, mixed land use parcels? Does that change? Or are you seeing that in the US? Are you seeing that in India? So what are your insights into, the post-COVID lifestyle changes that we are seeing?
Yeah, in economics, we're always taught supply and demand, but there's also something called the shift of customer preference. So I think that's what we really witnessed with, with COVID. There's no doubt that, the demand for housing, the impetus that people put on, the primary home or even second homes, weekend homes, as we call them, has been huge. So I think that's been the single biggest game changer. And it's all over the world. I mean, we have, some work we do in the United States as well. And we've seen that the preferences for, larger apartments, larger villas, larger homes is definitely there. Ourselves in India, like we're developing a project in Sushant Lok, right in the heart of the city, where we're actually doing Gurgaon's first mixed use community, where, we're building luxury homes as well as we're building a commercial, 3 lakh square feet space, which is going to have a PVR cinema, multiplex, restaurants, food court, and retail, and then apartments above. So I think that has been received very well. Also, I think partly due to the fact that, you're offering kind of a one-stop solution that in one location you can get, everything that you need. And I think increasingly after COVID, people have realized that having things close to you, in such times, uncertain times is a blessing. And also, given the situation of traffic and everything else, nobody wants to commute long distances. Doing over, you would need a banquet hall or a large conference room and people physically coming, flying in, driving in. So I think the world has changed. Like to our previous conversation, technology has made a lot of difference in our lives. But yes, post-COVID, the customer preferences have changed. There is a demand for larger space. There's a demand for having space in their home, primary home, from where they can work from home. I mean, that's been a huge game changer. I think all companies, all corporates have been investing in better computer equipment and so on for their employees, giving them allowances for them to, have a better Wi-Fi connectivity and so on. So I think that's changed a lot. We've also changed our offerings in that respect. Like I said, we're offering projects with a study room, for example, the clubs that we make, which are social places, you have video conferencing facilities, for example, or, to kind of thwart any kind of threat that may be from a future pandemic, you put in systems in place where, you have this, thermal imaging and you have security systems and checks and balances in place. For example, your service elevator, that we're designing the new buildings are all separated from your main elevators. So, any case of an emergency, somebody needs to be evacuated, anybody needs to, receive medical help, or if you need, supplies, deliveries to happen. So those would happen not from the mainstream elevators, but the service elevators. So a lot of those little nuances have come in. Germ-free paint. I mean, there's a lot of innovation that's come in, and I think it's here to stay. And we're seeing that, you have to kind of move with the times. So if you're able to, design your product along with this shift in customer preferences, then I think, you'll always come out on top. Has been our experience.
Super. Some of that really sounds exciting. Having a separate study room, for instance, I think most of our houses, most of us have suddenly realized that, whether it's kids doing school from home or you doing home meetings, it's become an essential part, right? To have
I think
separate meeting, study room.
Yeah, I think that the trend is here to stay. I mean, thankfully, COVID is now more or less gone, and one doesn't know what's going to happen later. But I do think that people have kind of gotten used to it. That, oh, I can do this meeting sitting at home. Then maybe I don't need to trouble everybody to each time. So I think this is a trend which may not be as much in force as it was during COVID, but I think it's definitely a trend which is here to stay, and people would like to have that option of having that flexibility in their space, and they definitely want bigger areas. Because we've all done Zoom meetings from dining tables and it doesn't work very well. So
yeah, that's a really good point. And so at that point, why don't I invite some of the other panelists, Gaurav and Ariman? What is your view about this? Or maybe even Mr. Marwa, as a senior, you may have a different view on Zoom, but yeah, why don't we get a little bit of a dipstick amongst everybody on the panel? What do you think about work from home? Gaurav, would you like to go first?
Yeah, I think per se in our business, I think work from home, I actually build stores in Australia sitting at home, but I don't think that is productive. I think in our contracting business, you need to be on ground zero. So from my perspective, work from home was a luxury, but it's not productive. I have a decent sized office, but my office is empty because everybody's on site. So for me, work from home is not something that is workable. I can have a study, I can have a boardroom or a project room, but I need to be on site. So from my perspective, it might be smaller percentage, but yeah, we need to be on site to have our work progressing. But yeah, I mean, it is something that has changed over time. You needed to move. Like I said, we were building a store in Sydney and we were doing video calls and there was a guy with a camera walking around site showing us. So yeah, that you've innovated and you've had to be out of your comfort zone. But I do remember when we saw that store realistically, we had like a 2,000 page snag list because they were not showing us everything. So yeah, so from my perspective, I'd like to be on site working versus work from home.
Super. Ariman, what is your view on this very quickly?
Sure. So, it's a very interesting topic because we started our company, during the first lockdown. So we actually started it in the midst of work from home. But, especially for, I guess, younger countries like ours, where majority of the population is entering the workforce, it becomes very difficult to train employees, from work from home. In countries where, let's say, people have already sort of processes in place, a more mature workforce, countries like that are able to sort of transition better to a work from home. So what we did actually was the reverse. In the pandemic, there came a point where it was becoming way too inefficient to work from home. So we started this concept of home from work. So, every third month we would book a sort of new destination. All the employees would travel there. We would stay together for 1 month. And, I think that's something that worked phenomenally well for us. In fact, it sort of became a trend. So, other startups also started doing this. But I think that, in the longer term, work from home, at least from my perspective, is not sustainable, especially for newer organizations.
Super. Thanks. I think that this has been a very insightful dipstick deviation, should I say. So we're back to you, Anubhav, with the next topic, which is on malls. In the US, there's obviously I think like globally, we're as a maybe a post-COVID impact or just, high streets are empty and everybody is going shopping online. So do you see, in your experience, when you've been in US, a lot of conversion sites from, say, retail, things going industrial or warehousing? And, what is your analysis of the trend going forward? Do you think there is a shift in land usage and occupancies?
Look, I think the transition and the expansion of e-commerce, has been happening way before obviously COVID or any of these things. And, if you look at the story in India, also logistics and, having the infrastructure in place has been very important for the government. So that's why I think the current government has put in a lot of focus on that. And I think we're kind of reaping the benefits of that. Typically You see companies like, Zomato's or whatever, delivering food, or whether it's Amazon, behemoth organizations. I think they put in a lot of, they've actually benefited from that in a big way. So I don't think that, coming back to retail and the, typical brick and mortar stores, I think, of course, they're not going to get fully replaced. But I do think that, most of these brands that are there are now doing more experiential marketing. So products which need a bit of an experience, which need, the customer to come in, are still, in demand, obviously. I think the big difference is that in the West and in India is that in India, we don't really understand the concept of a proper mall. Because in India, the developers are typically selling the retail spaces to investors. And then the investors and the developer are in turn then leasing these spaces out. So, there's no rent, there's no control on the kind of tenants that you have. The malls are not well managed. Of course, there are a few examples to the contrary. Case in point, you can say the City Walk Mall or some of the latest DLF malls, where they're all on leasehold model. Because that's how it's done in the West, where actually retail spaces are, owned by the developer. The old developer develops them, and he has the, the funding which comes from the various banks, when the banking system is much more liberal it is abroad than it is in India. So the borrowing costs are also much lower. So it actually makes sense for them to buy the land, develop the mall, raise the funds, whatever, and then lease it out. And when you lease it out, you control the experience. So, if there's a shift in the kind of customer preferences, then, the tenants can also come and go in that fashion. But when you sell real estate and then, the investor who's not really, the person running the business, he's just an investor owning the shop and then he's leasing it out, then the experience of retail can really vary. So that's a big differentiator, I think, between what's happening in India and what's happening in the West. But I do think that, with the mobile connectivity, faster internet speed and things becoming more easier, definitely there's a shift towards e-commerce and, being able to buy things of your daily use. That's definitely huge.
Absolutely. I think this trend is here to stay of, what they call impulse shopping, right? You're on a car journey, you're getting stuck somewhere, you're browsing on Instagram, and then suddenly, boom, you want to, buy that. So yeah, there's a lot of that happening, and definitely logistics, warehousing is going to go forward in a big way. My last question to you, Anubhav, is around residence. Obviously you're a master on the residential side. Do you see that the uptick which is happening right now in the residential side, the past mistakes, there have been a lot of fly-by-night developers who are now, facing bankruptcy and other issues, and maybe some of the customers of those kind of developments are stuck, without having a home even after 5-10 years at times. Do you think some of that experience is, still embedded, or people have short-term memory and they've forgotten that, and now you're going to have the bonhomie of, booking flats and investors jumping back in? So, is there a maturity coming to the market is the question.
See, Raghu, if you look at the total Indian residential market, I would say more than 70% is unorganized, right? I think developers like ourselves and others are maybe a small percentage of the total development that's happening in the, on the larger scale. We do mostly high-end, group housing, or, we do villa developments, which are more organized, and, the licensed colonies and so on. A lot of unlicensed work that goes on. So there's a lot of unscrupulous activity that has happened, and I think will continue to happen. India is the way it is. Of course, there's better awareness. I would say now with RERA coming in, that's been a game changer. So, since 2017, and I would say more recently now with the, RERA having registering all the projects is very important. You can't actively sell a project, you can't market it. The law has become stronger. So I think a lot of that unscrupulous development and a lot of the, unethical practices have now kind of gone away. I'm not saying that certain things can't happen. Of course, when there's a buyer seller, market is hot, people make decisions. But I think most people now are very well aware of the law, and most channel partners, brokers, who actually facilitate the transaction, property sale and purchase transactions, they also have come under the ambit of RERA. So they're also being regulated, they're also being watched, and the customer is demanding it. So once the customer is empowered, he knows that if I'm buying a project in which the RERA number is there, and I can go on the website and I can see all the project information. I can see if there's a loan against a project or not. I can see whether, the customer, whether the developer has had any bankruptcies. So there's a lot of power to the consumer now. So I do think that moving forward, we will see less issues than what has transpired in the past, because partly the system allowed those things to happen. I think moving forward, it's a much tighter rope for any developer to move forward. In fact, if we look at it, there's a lot of consolidation that's happened in the amongst the developers as well. And some of the larger players, national level players, have come forward and are doing more work. And we are more of a niche player, but of course, those who are delivering good projects and moving forward, there's, I think, a huge scope. And I think that the real estate market, the question you asked earlier, I think there's a huge demand that we see from where we're sitting, which has been unleashed. And I think the story will definitely continue through 2023, if not for the next few years. I definitely see there's a shortage of housing, and people want quality. They want they're willing to pay a price. It's just about delivering the right product and making sure delivering it at the right time with the right promise. So that's what counts. Otherwise, the scope is immense, no doubt.
Absolutely, I think you've hit the nail on the head. It's today all about delivery, and I think that's the same for each of our, whether you're in the service industry, whether you're in the manufacturing, it's all just basically getting the delivery on time and the quality. I think that's basically where we have to learn from some of the Western markets, or even from China for that matter.
See, there are some gaps. Obviously, I think the lending scenario is still weak in India. The capital, the availability of capital for residential real estate or to developers in general, is definitely something which is not a priority for the government. I think also the whole approval process is still the way it was. You still have to get the licenses and 25 different NOCs before you can start a project. There's a single window clearance thing has not come through. I'm part of CREDAI as well. So CREDAI and NAREDCO, a lot of the other, organizations that develop, that represent these, I would say, developers across the country, have been advocating for a lot of changes. So I think with time, if those things come, then I think we'll be inching closer towards, the developed nations, as we call them. But the demand is there.
Absolutely. Great. Thank you so much, Anubhav. We're going to jump across to the next topic with Gaurav, which is in latest technologies in retail and museum development. I think for a lot of us, museum development is going to be a very interesting area. So with that, without much ado, Gaurav, my question to you is on the technology front. We're going to start with technology. We're a young technology-oriented nation. So on the technology front, there are various innovations, including building information modeling, which is BIM, 3D laser scanning to produce 3D models for virtual tours, which is happening globally. Has any of these tech innovations reached India? Is it being adopted on the ground? What has your experience been? Gaurav, over to you.
Hi. So, straight to the point, you said it, we're a IT leading country, we lead globally with that. So but it really comes to adaptability. BIM is there in projects that we're working, but it's very, very few clients who are adapting to that, who have expectations globally, internationally. But in the Indian market per se, you'll have a very few, for example, the license for Revit and BIM in North India, there are only 2 companies who do that. So, and then it's about educating and training people to have an operator who can use BIM. So BIM is like a management system, and then you're working off a Revit model. So it is a minority of people who use it in terms of both operating from a contractor or to a project manager to the actual client. That synergy is limited. It's introduced. I think in India, from the metros, when we started, not from us, but when it was introduced is when it really came into large scale projects. Retail and museum, there's the only international brands who work with it. Unfortunately, local brands. So, Anubhav was mentioning about malls earlier. So you have a gamut of different perspective of brands that enter a mall. You have the anchor stores, which could be a Zara or a Gap or a H&M, right? International brands who work on these platforms, who expect that they can have their surveys conducted and then post, which is pre-construction, post-construction. But it's a very few in that whole lakh square foot. You've got 3 anchor stores who work it, but then your local brands, maybe a Ritu Kumar or whatever, they're nowhere near it. They're still working on AutoCAD. So I think there's a huge potential over there. I think in terms of cost saving, time saving, it's very, very important. We use it. We've seen the benefit of it. It really goes into the detail. I think your pre-construction phase is limited and reduced because you're getting information correlated very early. I think post-construction, you're saving a lot of money, in variation on snags and stuff like that. So I hope to see it more aggressive in our sector. But to answer, yes, it is there. And we hope to see more training centers so people are aware of it. It's simple. Today, a very generic example is in our contracting business. If you compare India with the overseas market, certain trades, you have carpentry schools, you have electrical schools. People are trained to do it. So same with this technology, you have it available. People are aware of it, but you have no training for them. So it's there, but it's not utilized to its full potential. So I genuinely feel that in the whole macro level, from information technology supporting our business down to the generic thing of a carpenter, there's a lot of training that's required. And we have so much potential because there's so many people, from a population, which is a young population, as what Ariman had mentioned. So yeah, I hope to see more things coming in way, and we are in a very good place from an India country perspective. A lot of people investing, a lot of brands coming into the country. So with that, this IT perspective also will pick up, and then we'll have more adaptation to it on ground zero here.
So Gaurav, just to break down for those of us who are not very familiar with BEAM, when you're talking about a building information modeling, could you break that down? What does that mean? I think, is it just a model that's created and then you look at that model, it's more detailed than a traditional model? How does that exactly work? I think it'll be insightful for a lot of the audience as well as everybody here to understand a little bit more about some of these innovations.
So the core competence for it is that all the stakeholders that attribute to designing a retail store, which would be mechanical, electrical, interiors, whatever, all of them work on that management system, and they're relaying information live. So if there's a change, so if you compare with a traditional AutoCAD that's been done, AutoCAD is a lot of drawings and everybody then has a coordination for it. Here, if you do a change, it's live, it's on the model. So you create a base model and then people start doing plug and play and they create the complete model. So when it goes, this is the pre-construction phase. So when you go into post-production and when you hit the site, you have everything within there coordinated. So there is nothing that's missing. There is no conflict, and you're addressing your issues live on that platform. So BEAM is the management system, which is linked to the model. And the core advantage is that everybody can access it. So for example, Raghu, in your business, GST, IT, income tax, everybody communicating on one model. Any change, anything, it's relayed live, right there live. So you're not going to separate entities. It doesn't deviate from these disciplines being involved in the project. It just, you have a weekly meeting, with your departments. I'll have it with my departments, but here on the model, you can see it within the minute on your phone, on your iPad, on your laptop, exactly what's happening. On projects, we have huge screens that display the model live. So any guy with the code can go and punch it and see it and say, okay, you know what? I'm working a certain section and I have this issue. How do I resolve it? He goes to the model. So it's more interactive and it's saving a lot of time.
Fantastic. So for everybody, I think, who hasn't gotten it, Gaurav has explained so easily, it's like a Google Docs, right?
Yeah.
Where people are working on a Google Docs from home, from office, and everybody can see the live changes happening. So it's amazing what BEAM can do. And obviously large projects have so many vendors and so many people. So coordination, it remains a big challenge. So you're really solving a lot of problems. I get that. Amazing. So we're going to go to, I think, the next topic, which is design and concept. I think you're very passionate about both. So on the design and concept stage, Gaurav, I wanted to understand about, sustainability. A lot of people are talking about green buildings and, using sustainable building materials. And, again, like what I had asked Anubhav about the post-COVID world, are you seeing retail design changing thanks to that? Maybe things like ship from store rather than ship to store, where you're ordering something online, it's getting shipped from, say, a retail destination rather than coming from a warehouse. are you seeing some post-COVID changes from your perspective on the retail side and about sustainability? Over to you, Gaurav.
Okay, so in terms of online percentage, so I'll answer the second part of the question first and then go to sustainability. In terms of trend changes, certain brands had already started online sales back in the day. These specific brands in the Indian market would see from a brick and mortar, I would say 12% of their sales, which is substantial. But it really depends on the brand sector, but there was a huge potential before the pandemic hit, right? But brick and mortar will always be there. It really depends on the ticket size of the product you buy. It even depends on the genre, whether, if you're going into apparel and if a lady wants to buy, they want to feel. So that's never going to change. I think retail in India, malls, is now predominantly the lease model. All the biggest players for developers in the country, they work on a lease model. The developer has it. Now you have funds who own the malls, but it is lease, your revenue generation from leasing the premises out. So it is coherent in that way. So it's not going to change. Online sales, the biggest change we see in retail stores, which you need to have space for. So the idea is amazing that you have an online system. So a customer will buy his product. He's in the mall, going to watch a movie, going to have a meal, will want to pick up that product, ease, convenience. So you will have an automated system, which we're developing and bringing into the country from next year, where you have the logistics center within the stockroom area of a retail store. But again, you need that space to implement this, because each square foot adds a rupee to them. For them, they want to generate. So they don't want to spend time in doing logistics and everything, because they rather have more product and SKUs on the board. But then it's a change because they feel, okay, it's quick. The person, like you said, on the phone orders the thing, they go there and they pick it up and you don't have any interaction. So there is no that fear of, a virus or whatever it may be. It's a machine operated. You scan your bar, you get the product out, you're out of the store in 5 minutes. Brands implementing that, we're looking the permitting aspect of it, and hopefully next day we'll have it. In terms of online sales, they will be there. But I think, again, like I said, ticket size. I think you go over a certain bracket, you're going to go there and pick up the product. And if I talk about macro percentage of the population and their ticket size and the way it works in our culture, you will always end up going to the mall. If you take Delhi, for example, the summers of scorching heat, you see people walk into the mall just to get that AC, and then they end up buying. So there are a lot of, criterias for online versus brick and mortar. So, and logistics centers are big. We're going to have huge logistics centers, but the point of pickup will always be their brick and mortar store. But I'm talking from an international brands perspective. I think domestically, the smaller stores, they're going to do online, and then again, it's a small cosmetic thing they pick up. You know how it is. It's driven more even by the lady population who wants to go there to the mall to see the product and then buy it. So, yeah.
And about sustainable material, are you seeing some sustainable material or some, consciousness coming around that?
So we, as a company catering to our brands, it is very important for two aspects to have sustainable material and then LEED certification in terms of energy efficiency, right? Unfortunately, in India, if I want to have a green board, which is recycled and used, I'm importing that board. I don't get that product to a certain extent in the Indian market. The Indian market, unfortunately, biggest issue we have, I think HR, human resources and people, we can train where that's the potential that we have. Raw material, we are so far behind that, like I said, a simple board, I have to import it. We're seeing it, but it's at a very nascent level. International brands are leading it. Domestic brands are, talking about it. You'll see the green fake grass in their store, but they're not doing anything about it. There's no logic or planning about it. That let's have a list of my 10 items that I'm going to use in my retail store. Okay, 5 of them, we should see how we can buy recycled material. So locally, no. Internationally, yes, they're dictating that, but very few end up exercising it. LEED efficiency is something that all across the board we're doing. I'd say that for domestic and international brands. In terms of our lighting that we have in stores, in terms of water faucets, water consumption. We're doing that. There are a lot of local suppliers who are now giving you a faucet that is efficient to switch off and not, running traditionally overflowing. So it's there again, not as proactive as it should be outside India.
Yeah, let's hope that changes because, some of the larger, if I were to talk about the listed space, the Aditya Birlas or the Tatas, Croma and everything, they obviously have to move towards sustainability as part of their business responsibility reporting.
Correct.
Now SEBI has introduced. So yeah, it will come, but yeah, let's hope that it happens more, as you said. So I'm going to go to the last topic, which is on museum development space. I know you're very passionate about something of this side. So what is your thoughts around museum development? And yes, it's a nascent stage in India, but where do you think that this whole space is going to go? And, development of museums, which is where you are at, where do you think, is that a niche area which is going to grow really rapidly going forward?
Okay, so I've been in the business for 12 plus years in terms of my own company. It's been predominantly retail. Museum excites us as a group. I'm lucky to have, partnered with MT, who's a leading company in museums globally. Whenever I travel, I take an opportunity to see the museums that they do, the World Expo or the Qatar Museum, or, really impressive stuff that they keep churning out as a company. And I think the biggest point in our discussions with our JV partner and seeing the future go forward was when I took them to, show them the Prime Minister's Museum as an example, right? I'm not going to go into details, but I think it's the idea or the intent. And I think seeing that, and I see in private players, and I see that we're getting requests for bids in terms of state governments doing it. It's a huge potential. So I think if the intent is there, then it's an opportunity. But I also do believe that we need to so for example, if we're spending 10 rupees for something in a PM's museum, I think we should spend 12 and get that international level of museums in the country. And I see us presenting that to the governments, to the private players, that look, this is what's available outside. We can now bring it here to India, and we should do this. We should show it to the country. It comes back to a lot of questions you asked. We have a shortfall of good materials in our country, for whatever the reason may be. But we have basic, hardware is imported, everything's imported. So if we take technology, if we take the experience of a museum, of when a customer walks in and brings that to him with the international product on the table, it's going to be fantastic. Just imagine, something that a normal citizen can walk into and be wowed. Today, they're wowed just by seeing color and just seeing something in the acrylic box. But if they get the experience and they can share that to their kids, and, we really present history, and you can see the government's presenting, tourism in a way through these museums, through these centers. They want to do that. Whether it's religious or not, it's still an intent for me. So I think that I'm really, gung-ho about it. And I think next is something that 2024 is where we're going to be ready for it as a company perspective. And then maybe in your next panel, we can have a discussion and showcase what we've done.
Super. Fingers crossed for that, and all the best for 2024 ahead. I think just to add that, I think it's funny how somebody was talking on this panel about people going to malls to spend their time just because there's an air-conditioned environment. And now we're talking about museums and the importance of culture. We're getting back to the Indian history and culture, which obviously is our roots. So we seem to have taken a 360 degrees around malls and now getting back to museums. So that's a nice journey.
Yeah, but the mall and the museum both have AC, so people will go.
Absolutely. So that's super. We're going to jump to the next topic of Ariman, which is innovation in funding. I think, Ariman, we were joking before that, you're the money man. So you're the most interesting guy on the panel. Not to say anything, sorry, about the rest of the leading folks on the panel today, but yeah, money tends to have that impact, doesn't it? So without much ado, Ariman, the first question to you, do you see the future of real estate to be more platform-based? whether it's in terms of fractional platforms like Myri, like your platform, or Asset Monk or RE Stack. There are a bunch of guys who've jumped into this space, or, internationally also, like a company like Slice who does like LRS based global fractional asset. Do you think that this sector, so to speak, of this platforms of fractional investment opportunities is the future and is now very much mainstream?
Yeah, so that's actually quite an interesting question. So the gap that we're trying to currently fill is the one between developers who require, let's say, a stable source of reliable finance. And when I say reliable, as much as it's a problem for investors to identify opportunities, it's also a problem for developers to deal with investors. So at the end of the day, an HNI sometimes goes and commits that he's going to take up a building or he's going to buy 2 floors, and then he doesn't go through with it because that's not his primary business, right? So HNI is going out and investing. So, his mood might change. He might speak to a few friends and so on and so forth. So, this has been an age-old problem for developers in India where they don't get a consistent and reliable source of capital. And on the other hand, we have investors. I think the most common statement you would hear from at least the retail investor who's invested in real estate is that he's burnt his hands at some point. So, because like in every asset class, I mean, you have an asset manager, in mutual funds, you have someone sort of guiding you with the contours of the industry. So similarly, what these platforms or platforms such as ours are providing are, multifold approach. One is that we do provide that expertise. So we curate the opportunities, thereby, limiting the investors' sort of scope in this whole transaction to only investing and then sort of reaping the returns from it. All the operational overhead, which is quite substantial in real estate, all of that we are sort of able to do as a platform for these opportunities that we curate. Another very big hurdle, I would say, to investing, especially in Indian commercial real estate, is the ticket size. So most of your commercial real estate in India used to be owned by foreign funds, the likes of Brookfield, Blackstone, and they continue to sort of ramp up their portfolios in the country. And the reason for this also is actually quite interesting. So commercial real estate, has a two-part return. One is your rental yields, which in itself is very competitive, of 8 to 9%, and then you have capital appreciation. So it's a very stable sort of proposition, which is why global funds have increasingly gravitated towards Indian commercial real estate. What we are basically doing is providing similar opportunities on our platform for the everyday retail investor to participate at significantly reduced minimum. So, we take on that overhead of sort of representing the syndication of investors in any given opportunity. So I do think that this is introducing a completely different investor base, fresh capital that previously hasn't been flowing into real estate, to this sector. So it is sort of accelerating growth. I mean, we've set up partnerships with developers, with investors, and we sort of, become that middleman layer that not only sort of transacts the asset initially, but also manages it for investors until the point of exit. So it's an end-to-end kind of solution that, platforms such as us are providing, and investors can invest entirely digitally. So that's the basic idea on, how we are trying to transform or how platforms such as ourselves are trying to transform, the investing landscape in real estate.
So that's really interesting, Ariman, and I have to ask Anubhav what his reaction to this. You're sitting on the other side of the fence, Anubhav, in terms of a developer, and you talked about briefly about the pain that developers go through in terms of finance, and US being such a great place in terms of access to capital. What is your reaction to what Ariman just talked about in terms of platform? Do you really think that this is here to stay and mainstream? From the other side of the fence, what's your take?
No, I'm listening to every word. When a lender speaks, a developer always listens. I mean, I'm not sure. I would love to talk more with Ariman offline, but of course, I think it's very interesting. I think access to capital, like I said earlier, also, has been a challenge for developers. I think for good developers as well. And we always hear about the loans going bad with developers going to NCLT. There's also good stories. So, we hear less about the good stories, but, that's the nature of news itself. But no, I think it's a very interesting format. I think, in India, which has been largely an unorganized sector, real estate, I think now that, regulation has come in, like I touched a little bit upon RERA, for example. GST coming in and demonetization. There have been a lot of steps which have kind of made real estate a bit more kosher, if you will. So I think that definitely attracts the appetite of large institutional investors. If you look at the kind of foreign money that's been coming into the real estate sector, whether it's industrial, logistics, commercial real estate, residential. I think what Ariman was alluding to was the likes of Blackstone and so on, coming in and picking up large grade A buildings. If you think about it, before there were no developers building grade A buildings. So, now you see a lot more of those developments coming in, which, can be matched with some of the best in the world. And they have a solid rental yield. And, REITs are also, coming in, have started coming into India, in one shape or the other. So I think this is the requirement of today, to have these different platforms where different investors, retail investors, when I say retail, I don't mean buying retail, but even just people who want to put in a certain amount of money, not necessarily buy a unit of real estate, but buy a unit of investment which corresponds to certain real estate, which is you can touch and feel and see and feel comfortable with. I think it's got enormous scope, and I have no doubt it's going to grow.
Super. So word of confidence from the panel here. So we're going to go, Ariman, to the next question, which is around fintech funding. Obviously you're in this circle. So I'm assuming you have a lot of insight into some of the other players, in terms of who are bringing in innovative funding. So there are other players like, say, Home Capital, which is a fintech fund, online fintech company, which has graduated from consumer personal spending. The typical fintech was doing consumer personal loans, right? And now they're entering real estate space in a company like Home Capital, like I mentioned. Do you think that there are going to be more players who are going to be jumping into this space, given exactly what Anubhav's saying? The transparency is increasing, the demand is there. Hopefully the guy on the other side, in terms of the developer, is also going to be a little more conscious about delivery and quality. So the finance guys in the middle, hopefully not going to burn his fingers. So do you think that the fintech space is also going to join the party?
No, absolutely. I mean, today, fintech is the way via which at least we are trying to streamline this entire investment process. And I'll give you an example. If someone is going and purchasing, or HNI is purchasing a property for, let's say, 1.5 to 2 crores, he might not go and hire your tier one lawyers. I mean, it might not even make sense for him to go and hire tier one lawyers, considering the overhead and things like that. But, as a platform, when you go out and syndicate funds, you, number one, are purchasing much larger assets, grade A assets, 50 crores, 100 crores. And what that allows you to do is you are able to employ the best consultants, all the way from legal to valuation, to sort of leasing. And that adds a tremendous amount of value. So, by picking up these kinds of assets, and investors are able to reap the benefits of these high quantum assets via sort of fractional, if you must, size investments. So, that's the sort of strength of a fintech, that by aggregating these funds, number one, they're limiting any individual's exposure, whilst the individual is still able to sort of reap the benefits of a large capital required asset. So that's one aspect of it. Something else interesting is that traditionally, if you, discuss the investing space in real estate, it's either buying a property. That was the only thought. Today, investments in real estate come in many shapes and sizes. We started also sort of buying commercial real estate and holding it. Today, we've entered the debt segment, where we are working with managed leasing players, where we are doing, lease rental discounting, and investors are participating in that. We are starting a LRS vertical, via which investors sitting over here will be able to participate in foreign properties. And again, we're tying up with the operator there. So, the expertise or the operating overhead is not, and shouldn't be, in fact, any investor's issue or burden. So that's really the layer that fintech brings, where they curate these opportunities, and effectively the success of any fintech platform will be the track record. So, over time, as this industry matures, and it is maturing today, we are seeing, regulation come in, which is again a very good indicator. We will see a lot more sort of capital flow in from these kinds of platforms into the entire real estate sector. Even I think in the last 3 years, only fractional platforms, maybe if you pick the top 3 itself, have done more than 2,000, 2,500 crores which is a sizable amount of the transacted volume, especially in a pandemic. And this is purely in the office space segment of A-grade buildings. So, in that subset, this is quite a large portion. So fintechs are already moving this much capital, and we are at the very nascent parts of it, where these platforms only started to emerge in India 3 or 4 years ago, including ourselves. Then, the next 5 years will be very exciting, especially, as the entire industry streamlines.
Super. So a lot of positivity there. I think you touched upon transparency as part of, what you just said. I'm going to ask you to elaborate a little bit about transparency, because that is, I think, a cornerstone on the real estate side, right? It's for a lot of people, most sizable kind of spend that they're going to do in their life. So, there's obviously a real need for transparency around that. I think, there are newer agencies like, I think, Lysis, Forez, and Teal, who have gotten into this space about research and, putting out their comps and, obtaining data. And do you think that is a trend which is going to increase? Are you going to have greater, like what Anubhav earlier said, that even online, you're going to go somewhere and you're going to have on the click of your phone, the comps available? Is that something that you can really foresee? I think being a young startup founder, you guys tend to see the early curve. So what is your take on that?
So, that's actually quite an interesting point. I mean, we are working on building a certain database. So, all these lease agreements and sale agreements that we are discussing, these are all actually available online. It's only the difficulty of reaching the end document that makes it problematic in terms of data symmetry. So what we are trying to do is basically, collate all these different agreements, build certain algorithms that can read off these documents, because all these documents are not in the same language, they're not in the same format structure, and these are scanned PDFs. So it's not like a text document that you can just sort of pass the text and figure out, the different intricacies. So we are trying to figure out how we can, on a large scale, automate that, sort of NLP part of it. But effectively, yes, it's absolutely doable. I mean, even if today you go onto our platform, what we do is, apart from all these research reports, which we do provide as an additional value add, but we give a full stacking plan of the building, development, micro market. And right now we sort of extract that data manually. But, as soon as that becomes automated, then I don't think we are very far away from the day, probably another 6 months, where this will be absolutely viable, at least in the commercial real estate space. So for residential, it's a little bit more complicated because of the transaction volume, and there are quite a few transactions which don't end up getting registered. They stay on ATSs or things like that. But in the commercial real estate space, this is not something which, is very difficult, especially with the kind of access that these documents or sort of the platforms on which these documents are already available on. So, sitting digitally, you can buy any of these lease agreements in a specific building for a nominal amount of money. So it's only a matter of sort of aggregation and data analytics, which will lead to the end result you were discussing.
To elaborate that point, Arvind, in terms of, when you do a real estate transaction, it's not only the legal and the tax, but at times even the architectural, like we had talked about in Delhi, for instance, you had a lot of ceiling because, in residential houses, people had opened offices, people had opened retail and things like that. So, do you think going forward, there is going to be some simplification around that an average Joe can pretty much get his head wrapped around some of these building bylaws, architectural, even safety standards, legal issues, tax issues? What is your gut call? I mean, for this to really become a revolution, things need to become simple, I guess, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, so that's actually traditionally been the issue with real estate. So, when you are selling someone a small share, or not even a share, like a demarcated to the 200 square feet, that person is not really going to undertake diligence. But when you're sort of purchasing a floor and giving a share, of that entire floor, as opposed to demarcated space, then effectively, you've not broken down that area. So just to give you insight, the levels of diligence that we go through, we have an architect, we have a structural engineer, we also get a technical diligence done. We get 2 levels of legal done. Of course, title comes as part of that. We get valuation reports, research reports, and the data stacking. So, an individual sort of undertaking all this, even if he has the material, I don't know how much know-how he would have to sort of do all of this, which is why I think these syndication platforms that are representing investors are becoming increasingly important. I mean, even today, after doing so many transactions, every transaction there's something new, which we could have, or any other investor could have missed. So having a very strong team in terms of diligence, I think, is the most important part of investing in real estate. If you go wrong over there, then irrespective, I don't think the investment is going to turn out well. So that's one of the key risks, at least in my opinion, as an investor, to ensure that all 10 check boxes are met and nothing is really skipped.
Well, so I think thanks so much, Ariman. We're going to jump to the question answer section. We've got many interesting questions. So I'm going to go with the first one, which I'm going to ask you, Ariman. What is the duration after which the next innovation cycle in real estate industry kicks in? Do you think real estate as an industry has the potential to innovate and solve housing problems for the world? Very interesting. Why don't you take a shot at that?
So, I think that the innovation, we are actually in the midst of the innovation cycle in real estate today. The kinds of things that we are seeing have actually come up in the last 4 years. So, some of the major sectors would be the prop tech investing sector, which sort of we are part of. You have your co-working managed leasing sector, which is also sort of really becoming a mature industry. Today they control a significant part of the entire leasing that happens, in the country. You have your SaaS-based real estate platforms that are sort of proactively enabling developers to generate leads. So today a developer doesn't even have to sort of worry about building a marketing capability in-house. So, he can sort of outsource that to these SaaS platforms. So we are seeing the kinds of innovation which I don't think, existed before. And all of these are in their own, measure, changing the way things were happening previously. It's a world apart today with respect to all these things. There are even diligence firms coming up that are trying to automate at least the title diligence part. So, that will be such a transition. Today title diligence is a tedious process. It takes 1 week with a lawyer and you're still not certain, if you've got the right result by the end of it. So overall, all these different value adds are going to change. In the US, some of these sectors are far more mature. Like just to give you a benchmark, the entire investments real estate platform sort of sector today in India is 3,000 crores. In the US, a single firm in this sector is managing $45 billion. So, they had about an 8-9 year head start. Similar with managed leasing, similar with their sort of SaaS solutions. So I do think we are in the midst of that cycle. You're seeing increasing number of startup acquisitions also, in fact, in the prop tech space. So you're seeing a lot of consolidation, and this is a sign usually of the entire industry maturing. And most importantly, I would say, is SEBI stepping in. The minute regulation comes in, I think that gives a stamp of confidence of approval to all stakeholders. So SEBI stepped into the P2P lending space, I think, in 2018. Once that became sizable enough, I think they've stepped into your FLDG space. They've stepped into the slice kind of models that we're deploying for NBFCs, BNPL. So now I think, and I hope it's time that, at least this sector as well sees some level of regulation, which will, further accelerate its growth. That's the point at which we will be able to compete, with similar tech solutions in the US, which are supported with regulation. So I think that's the one fundamental growth driver, that will take us to the next level.
Super. So Anubhav, the next question is for you. It says everyone's come across the statement real estate is down or real estate is up. What are the primary factors that lead to these movements?
Well, of course, it's demand supply. No doubt in that. See, everybody always asks, when is a good time to buy? When is a good time to sell? I think ultimately, if the due diligence is good, and whether you're buying a piece of land or you're buying a residential house, an apartment or anything else, I think the question is that if you have a clean title, whenever you buy real estate, it's a good time to buy real estate in a country like India. So whenever you have the means to do it and you're getting a good deal, it's not about, because, we've seen this time and again, we've been in business more than 30 years, a little bit of few rupees per square foot up or down is not what kills you, right? What kills you is the diligence and making the right decision and buying something with which you have a confidence that it will get delivered and you have some use for it. See, there are two categories of buyers, either you're an investor or you're an end user. There's literally no other category. So if you're an end user, if you buy a home today, which I think the price is a bit on the higher side, but like I said, I think demand is good. So maybe 2023, we'll see more escalation in prices. But regardless of that, if you're an end user, you buy a home today, you're buying it for your own, to live in it. It doesn't matter if the property price goes up or down, because it really doesn't matter to you. You're not dependent on it as an income. Yes, if you're buying as an investor, a rental yielding asset, like I think what Ariman would be doing is, getting customers, who buy into his platform, to buy a unit of real estate. Of course, he has to buy the right product, which creates, which gives you a certain kind of return, so that it can be promised, back to the investor. So there, I think, it's a matter of demand supply, using the right, the right timing for buying the right type of product that you're using. So I think you should be clear as to what you want, what is your end use, and then do your diligence, and then zero in and go ahead and buy. I think buying sooner is always better than buying later, because prices seem to go up and people miss the opportunity.
Absolutely. Thanks so much for that. Gaurav, the next question is for you regarding the development future of museums with attention towards building new museums. How can the existing museum be preserved to its glory? For example, the Natural Crafts Museum requires major infra renovations. What's your take, Gaurav?
Okay, thanks. I'm going to take the Prime Minister's Museum as a clear example, because that was something that was an existing building and then they created extension. You're limited in terms of renovating an existing heritage building per se. You have government bodies that dictate your limitations to, for preservation of these properties. So I think it's difficult to say that they can come to their glory. You can do the materials back in the day and today, they're a world of a difference also, even though we're limited here. So I think creating extensions, creating refurbishment within, doing newer space planning is something to go forward with for the old historical projects. But I think creating an extension would be glorifying and getting that message across from what it was back in the day to current date, because I think limitations of what you could do for IT development, AV, you need wiring. You can't touch, these stone buildings. You can't create a groove and run a wire through it. It's impossible. And then having those wires, there are lots of them, having them visible takes away the beauty. So I think you're limited. But then the way the Prime Minister's Museum was done, they created a new structure behind it. They tried to have a lot of audiovisual and a lot of prop sections. So I think extensions of the existing unit is what I would say would be something to propose.
Thank you for that, Gaurav. Last question we've got is, I think we'll ask Ariman to take a jab at this. What role does algorithms and big data play in real estate?
Sure. So, the application of big data and algorithms, not only to real estate, but I would say to any sector, is actually on much more micro use cases. Like, for example, the one I was mentioning earlier, where we are trying to scrape, certain data from a large volume of these sale deeds or lease agreements. That kind of task requires automation. If you sort of get the data entry, if you go down the data entry route, then it's not really a tech solution. I mean, number one, you'll be susceptible to human error. And more importantly, as time proceeds, we won't be able to scale that sort of data retrieval without the use of tech. So, that's one application. Another application is that age-old problem has always been, I would say, more so for developers, is the marketing cost. So as the real estate space grows, marketing costs online continues to become a lot more infeasible. Today it's gone past the point of infeasible. And you're seeing, the more prominent developers, like let's say Lodha, they've set up their own marketing arm. I'm forgetting the name of it today, but sort of, spending a lot of money there. So where algorithms comes in and machine learning comes in, is it understands who your TG is. It sort of enables you to do systematic marketing to them. In fact, we also have a tool that we built in-house that, sort of works on the premise of machine learning, where in real time, you're feeding it various data points about every engagement, every interaction, albeit online or offline. So through emailers, how much time have they spent on a certain slide, which slide did they spend time on? Then, based on the larger data set, these algorithms are able to detect or prioritize, who you should be contacting. So overall, the applications are already sort of coming in place. One of the most, I think, popular applications is the open door algorithm to determining, I think, price, for properties based on certain parameters. So I think that there is a version of that in India, which is under beta testing. There's a platform, which I'm forgetting what it's called. But, similar to open door, they're trying to execute that here. So there are lots of different, areas in which this is already under works. And I do anticipate this year, will be the year where we'll see a lot of these platforms come to life, because already angel funding, initial POCs for these kinds of products exist. So this year we will see a lot of them come to fruition.
Super. Thanks so much for that. I want to thank once again all the panelists for being here and all the delegates for being here and spending time. I hope you have got a good value add and a takeaway. I have just put on the screen our next webinar, which is going to be on the 10th of February. We all know that the budget is coming around the corner. Mrs. Sitaraman is going to announce that on the 1st. And on the 10th, we're going to have a quick reaction and industry feedback on the union budget, which is going to happen on the 10th. So hope you guys can all make it for that and join us for that. In the meantime, thank you. All the best and God bless. Stay good. Stay safe. Thank you. Bye-bye. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.